Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, Armored Gaming. It's that day of the week again for monster analysis, and today we have General Nishant. The Dark Troops need a general that is the darkest monster of them all. Here's that monster. Nishant is toxic and his very touch can infect his enemies and consume them to death. Now, just by reading that description, you would think that General Nishant has an instant death move, or at least a poison skill, but that doesn't appear the case. But regardless, this monster is absolutely amazing. He is possibly the second or third best legendary dark attacker in the whole game. So I'm just going to scroll through his forms really quickly, which by the way, they are all really cool. Just check that out. I love his baby form, his adult form, they are all really cool. But let's get straight into what we came here for. His stats: power 3542. That is actually the strongest, the highest power in the whole game, just for legendary dark monsters. 3575 is actually the highest in the game, excluding Worker Hulk, and a lot of fire monsters, and I think Annihilator R2 tend to have that. But in terms of dark monsters, this just broke the old highest power. His life comes in at 22,016. That's a little on the low end, but again, this is an attacker, and as we've seen, usually the way Social Point does it, in order to keep it balanced, a monster with high power usually ends up having really low life. But what's really great about this monster is we go over here to his speed, 3,476. That is actually the third fastest monster for legendary dark monsters. And what's really incredible about this speed is that it's actually the fastest in terms of attackers. So faster than this monster is Krampus, who of course is a deny monster, and he has the fastest speed for darks, excluding Losty Ghost. But I mean, come on guys, like he has a power of 29,000 or 2,900, so he can't really compete with General Nishant or Barbatos in terms of attackers. So this general, in terms of stats, he probably has the best stats for an attacker. However, when you go to the skills, Barbatos is still unmatched because he has that move that gives him 2x damage and an extra churn, and like, come on, like there's no comparison to that. So he's a dark monster, his weakness is light, and his trait, like all the generals, is tough. Generals are tough. All status effects have a 35% less accuracy against this target. Now what I like about this, comparing to Barbatos, who is like undisputably the #1 dark attacker in the game, Barbatos is immune to nightmares, which isn't a really good trait to have. It's not that useful. Tough gives you, it at least gives you a chance to stand up against stun or freeze or possession or any of those negative skills, which is why in terms of just stats and trait, General Nishant is superior to Barbatos. But when we move into the skills, you'll see why Barbatos is still #1. And it's also important to compare to Fenrir. Fenrir has a 65 damage, 27 stamina, 0 cooldown skill, and he has a really high power as well as a really nice speed. So again, it's hard to compare like who's in second place or third place, but I would have to say General Nishant is definitely within the top 3 dark attackers. But we're just going to go ahead and scroll down to the skills. So starting off with default and special, Nishant Cuts, Insane Ordeal, nothing special about these moves. 25 and 30, we're gonna go ahead and skip those, and we're gonna move on to his special. Demonic Obliteration deals insane special damage, may burn target. Now this is awesome. It's 90 damage, 120 accuracy, of course, burning for 3 turns. But let's be real, if you get hit with this attack, you probably won't be alive to even experience the burning. You're gonna be dead. What I don't like about this, it's a single target hit. Like a lot of generals, when they first came out, they had single targets, and General Nishant is no different. He has a single target hit. It would have been nice if it was an AoE, but it's not, so we have to live with it. It's still a good move if you can land it. If you happen to get it on the first turn and use it, you pretty much like guaranteed knocked out one enemy. For skills group 1, we have Frenetic Cuts, which 35 damage, 26 stamina, 0 turn cooldown, gives bleeding. Satanic Fire, 50% chance to give burning, also 0 cooldown, also 35 damage, also 26 stamina. And Maniacal Souls, exact same damage output, same stamina, same cooldown, but this time it gives nightmares. So he has a lot of debuff skills. So based on that alone, we know this monster is going to have a lot of debuff skills in skills group 2 and 3. So we're going to go ahead and move on to those because you really don't need anything from skills group #1. So starting off with skills group 2, we have Impious Cuts, which is a single enemy, 40 damage, 28 stamina, deals moderate special damage, may make all targets bleed. Now I've been hearing that this second part isn't true. It doesn't make all targets bleed, it makes one target bleed. Or maybe that was for Torment Cuts, I'm not exactly sure. But the tricky thing about these kinds of skills is normally when you target one monster, it only affects that one monster. There's a very few amount of monsters that do target one monster and can, like, General Thetis is a perfect example. She can attack one monster and it has a chance for everyone to freeze. Now, a lot of the monsters have been released, they've been having stuff like target one monster may make all targets bleed, and that hasn't been the case. So that might just be a mismatch with wiki misinterpretation, so it's hard. So I would always suggest test the moves out yourself. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think this makes all targets bleed. I could be wrong, but if you do equip the move, test it out before actually equipping it. It's nice that it's 0 cooldown, and it's nice that it's 40 damage. It's higher than the top monsters, and it does have that added bleed effect. But I personally wouldn't run it, even though I love a lot of 0 cooldown moves, and a lot of people also love to run them because they're anti-Timerion. But really, like a 40 damage move, I wouldn't really consider that anti-Timerion. An anti-Timerion move for me is like 55 damage, maybe, or definitely 60 and above with 0 cooldown. That's anti-Timerion for me. So just take that into consideration. Moving on to Affliction Souls. Affliction Souls deals moderate dark damage to all enemies, may give nightmares to all targets, requires cooldown. Now this move is actually pretty good. 35 damage, 37 stamina is a little high, 4 turn cooldown, that's also high, but it gives nightmares, which of course it drains 5% of their life for the next 3 turns, and it takes away 10% of their stamina on the very first attack. It's an okay move, however I wouldn't recommend it. You don't need it. Unfortunately, I have this move on my monster because I didn't end up getting Shadow Form for whatever reason. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, because if you use General Nishant in a team with, say, someone like Lux or Lord of Atlantis who can give a 2x damage and a buff, then you can honestly just do Satanic Flames. It's an AoE burning, and then next turn Affliction Souls, an AoE nightmares, and I'm like 99% sure that you're most likely gonna wipe out the enemy team just using 2 AoEs, as long as you have another monster to buff you. However, overall, I wouldn't recommend this attack, and instead I would recommend Shadow Form from Skills Group 2. And Shadow Form, what this is like General Nishant's unique skill. So I've mentioned in past videos that generals tend to have a unique skill to them. Thetis has her Stamina Devours and Elite Sea Troops. Atum has his Heart as a Rock. General Darmith has his Dragon Berserker. And I'm actually going to compare Shadow Form to Dragon Berserker. So what Shadow Form does is that it ignores all incoming attacks for 1 turn. Now if you know General Darmith, he ignores 50% of the damage for 1 turn. So this is far superior. You're ignoring 100% damage. And you may apply damage boost to yourself. Now, unfortunately, this is only 50% damage boost as opposed to Darmith's 100% damage boost or 2x boost. So it's a give and take there. But with the added benefit to Nishant is that you get increased accuracy, and that's perfect if you're doing AoEs, because AoEs tend to have a 90% accuracy. So Shadow Form is really good, because if you start off by using this move, you're going to ignore 100% damage. But if this is anything like Space Time, it gives you Phantom, which doesn't ignore status effects, which means you're still able to be frozen, you're still able to be stunned, negative effects can still hit you even though you take no damage. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it is a good thing that generals tend to have tough, or all generals have tough. What I tend to not like about monsters that have a self boost is that you waste 1 turn giving yourself the boost, and in that time you're susceptible to attacks, you're susceptible to negative effects. So I do like that Phantom kind of gives away from that, like you take absolutely 0 damage, like all the enemy monsters can attack you and you'll take no damage. So that's really nice. You know, Firestorm he gives himself a 30% shield, which is nice, but that's still a really weak shield. Other monsters like Mega Ostium, he doesn't do anything. He gives himself a 2x boost, and you kind of just have to wait and hope your monster doesn't get hit, doesn't die or anything. But of course, that's why you have deniers and such. But just alone, like if this monster's ever by himself and you use Shadow Form, you have that safety net guard of Phantom to protect you from getting attacked, which is why I really like the move. I really recommend you run this move. Shadow Form, it's a must-have move. Moving on to Skills Group 3, we have Torment Cuts. And this is like his main attack, I guess. It deals very heavy special damage, may make all targets bleed. Again, from my understanding, it doesn't make all targets bleed, it only makes 1 target bleed. So keep that in mind when using the move, make sure to test it out yourself. And it requires a cooldown. It's 65 damage, 31 stamina, 2 turn cooldown. I'm not a big fan of this 2 turn cooldown. Again, I mentioned earlier that Fenrir has a really nice power, has a 65 damage move. It's only 27 stamina, which again can be used at any time you have 0 stamina and you have stamina regeneration. And it's no cooldown. So yeah, although this gives bleeding, I'd much prefer to have Fenrir who can spam that attack like twice or 3 times in a row, doesn't matter, as opposed to this that has a 2 turn cooldown. Again, it's still a very good move. Considering the high power, you definitely want to run this. This move is going to be absolutely needed in order to one-hit enemies. Moving on to Satanic Flames. Deals moderate dark damage to all enemies, may burn all targets. So it's kind of like his other skill, Affliction Souls. But instead of that, you do burning. So it's the same 4 turn cooldown, 37 stamina, 35 damage. So this is a really good move. It gives burning. It's synonymous to Barbatos Hellfire. Definitely a really good AoE. You want to run this. Burning is one of the best negative effects in the whole game. And his last move is Dark Supremacy. Deals heavy dark damage, makes enemy very weak against dark attacks for 1 turn, requires cooldown. Now this is kind of an interesting move. To an extent it's not that useful, but it's also kind of useful. So it would have been nice if this was an AoE like everyone has been mentioning. Of course, the fact that it's one target, it doesn't help that much, because if you use Dark Supremacy and you attack one target, you look at all of your skills, the only dark skills you have are Satanic Flames and Affliction Souls, and they're both AoEs. And Torment Cuts, Impious Cuts, they're all special. Unless you want to move over to skills group 1, you can run Satanic Fire and Maniacal Souls, but they're only 35 damage. So it's a really interesting thing. Dark Supremacy, I personally do run it. A lot of people would probably prefer to run Impious Cuts. Again, that's probably up to you. So for sure you want to run Shadow Form and Torment Cuts. And then if you really don't want Dark Supremacy, I'd actually be all for you running Affliction Souls and Satanic Flames. Just run 2 AoEs, run Torment Cuts. The problem with this build is, of course, you're gonna have really high cooldowns. Shadow Form 4, Affliction Souls 4, Satanic Flames 4, Torment Cuts 2. But you normally start off with game with Shadow Form to give yourself precision and the damage boost, and then you'd go on to using the AoE Burning, the AoE Nightmares, and Torment Cuts whenever needed. But if you really want to equip Impious Cuts, I guess it's a good alternative, because you'd have a 0 cooldown move. It's only 40 damage, which again I don't like. And the more I'm reviewing General Nishant, I'm thinking this monster would actually be the 3rd best attacker, and Fenrir would take the 2nd spot, just because Dark Supremacy, it's a good move, but again it's not needed considering you have mostly AoEs. And if you sacrifice an AoE for Impious Cuts, that's a really low damage skill, considering Fenrir can spam that 65 damage skill. And Shadow Form, it's not a 2x boost, it's a 50% boost. The more I actually analyze this monster, the more questions and doubts I'm bringing to myself. Now, there's no doubt this monster is good. He has the highest power in the game, like I mentioned, so that makes him a force to be reckoned with. He has good AoEs, that phantom damage boost, self-precision is really good. But again, if you're pairing up your attacker with someone like Lux or Lord of Analsyis, where they already give that 2x damage boost and that precision, then I would think that would make General Nishant a lot better. But however, in Team Wars, you can't always do your perfect combinations. So actually, I'm a little confused right now. I know this is supposed to be an analysis, but I'm actually having trouble analyzing myself. So in terms of what skills I would recommend, there's a few possibilities I'm seeing. I would recommend you run Shadow Form, and I would recommend you run Torment Cuts, and I would actually recommend maybe you want to run the 2 AoEs, Satanic Flames, Affliction Souls. Alternatively, you could run Torment Cuts, Dark Supremacy, Satanic Flames, and Shadow Form. So my final thoughts on the skill sets: Dark Supremacy, it seems like a really high cooldown for a really low return. So for example, if you start the game off with Shadow Form, are you really going to want to use Dark Supremacy on one monster and then use your 3rd turn to use the AoE just to have the added effect of Dark Supremacy? I don't think many people would want to do that. What normally tends to happen is you want to start off the game with a boost, so Shadow Form, and then you want to go straight into an AoE, so Satanic Flames or Affliction Soul, Satanic Flames being the better choice. Or if you have Shadow Form and then Torment Cuts can kill one monster, you normally would want to do that. So I'm a little iffy about Dark Supremacy now, so I'm changing my opinion a bit. I think you definitely want to run Shadow Form, you definitely want to run Torment Cuts, and you want to run Satanic Flames. And I don't actually believe Dark Supremacy is needed. I think maybe you want to run Impious Cuts if you're afraid of not having a 0 cooldown skill, and of course it gives bleeding, so it's a pretty good move. Or you want to run Affliction Souls, again because Shadow Form gives you precision, so having 2 AoEs, they're always going to land. That's actually the skill set I'm going to do when I get my next General Nishant, since I didn't get Shadow Form on mine. So I think that's what you want to do. But again, I'm not saying Dark Supremacy is bad. I personally do run it, and I still think it's a good move. However, another skill set is actually the Shadow Form, Torment Cuts, Satanic Flames, Dark Supremacy. Although there's a really high cooldowns, it's not a bad skill set, because technically Dark Supremacy would be a better buff. Well, it's a debuff for the opponent, but it's a better buff for your dark attack than Shadow Form. Again, Shadow Form only gives a 50% attack boost, while Dark Supremacy being very weak, I'm pretty sure that's the equivalent to a 2x boost. So if there's a main monster on the enemy team that you need to take down, it's technically better to use Dark Supremacy and then Satanic Flames as opposed to Shadow Form and then Satanic Flames. So I'm guessing those are the 2 skill sets you want to juggle between. You want to equip Shadow Form, Torment Cuts, Dark Supremacy, Satanic Flames, or you probably want to do Shadow Form, Torment Cuts, Satanic Flames, and Affliction Souls. And of course, if you're just worried about the high cooldowns, you probably want to input Impious Cuts, and you could probably do away with one of the AoEs or Torment Cuts if you don't want it. So sorry about these external conflicts I'm having about his skill set now. I wasn't expecting it. I thought he was a pretty straightforward monster, but the more I actually looked into the moves, the more discrepancies I saw. As far as teams, like I said, he's an attacker. You definitely want to equip them with someone who can completely immobilize the enemy team. Chimera, General Thetis, Cabin Fish, those are all monsters that are typically used. For PvP, you probably do want to run someone that can buff him and give him precision, so you don't need to waste a turn doing Shadow Form. And again, that always helps. That'll especially help if you're running the 2 AoE skills. But in terms of Team Wars, he's an attacker, so if you're ever paired up with like Water, Dark, and then Common, use your Water as the main deny, and General Nishant can be a really good attacker. He can easily take out monsters in one hit. As far as runes go, you want to give this monster 3 strength runes if you're at like the level 4, 5, 6 runes. But if you're fighting against opponents who have level 10 runes, you're gonna absolutely need to give them 2 strength runes and 1 speed, and that's just to make them competitive, because if you run 3 strength runes at the level of level 10 runes, the enemy monsters are going to go twice before you even get to go once. And I think that completes my analysis on General Nishant. Again, sorry for the little mishap when I was debating the skills with myself. Overall, I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. Make sure to comment below what you thought about this analysis, and more importantly, make sure to comment who you want to see the following week. Again, I go by whichever monster I see is mentioned the most in the comments, or whichever monster has the most thumbs up. So be sure to give thumbs up if you agree with someone on a monster I should analyze next week. And that's it for now, guys. Have a great day.